All right, this mailbag question came in from Bud. The sample size is relatively small, but the SEC seems to have taken a step backward in the last few years as having the best teams in the country. Fact check, true. What are your thoughts on how much this has been influenced by NIL and the transfer portal, and how do you feel that Oregon's program in the Big Ten in general will continue to successfully use these new tools? I have full faith and confidence that Oregon will have whatever resource it needs to go compete for a national championship. They just have to put together the right roster. Coaching staff has to continue to get better, and they have to have the right season where things go your way. That's all it is. There is not a need for investment. And again, as a Mariners fan, let me tell you, that's not always the case. Sometimes you don't have an all-in sort of commitment. There are plenty of colleges across the country. Arizona State was like this for a long time, and Dillingham is changing things down there, where there was not the necessary level of administrative and community buy-in and commitment to making the football program great. Arizona State should have been what they were this season a long time ago. They showed a couple glimpses of it, but they never sustained it because they didn't always make the right coaching hires, but they also haven't cared as much as they needed to. See, the Herm Edwards situation, that was just all an entire debacle. My guy Richie Bradshaw, Locked On Sun Devils, can tell you all about it. But for Oregon going out and trying to win a national championship, it used to feel like they're going to have to go through the SEC, or at some point they're going to have to be playing at an SEC sort of level. The SEC does not have a monopoly on the best talent in college football in the same way it used to. It was never, strictly speaking, a monopoly. You had ACC and Big Ten teams that would win, but Ohio State's going to thump Notre Dame. That'll be 2 straight years the Big Ten wins a national championship. That's a conference Oregon just won, by the way. I'm going to remind you all of that a lot over the course of the offseason because I know it was a horrible ending to what was a really great year. But in the aftermath, it felt like Oregon was a lot further away from the national championship than they actually were. There is a strong likelihood, nothing's ever guaranteed, but there is a strong likelihood Oregon is going to have a victory over the eventual national champion. So, that didn't used to feel that way. When you beat a team, when Oregon would beat a team like Ohio State in 2021, it felt more like, well, they just pulled a huge upset and that's great, but Ohio State's not really a national title contender. They're really good. It's a huge win, but they're not as good as, the SEC team. And Georgia went out and dominated. And then in 2022, Oregon learned, long ways away from where the SEC is at. The reign of the SEC dominating college football, that's over. They're still really good. There are a bunch of great teams. I'd probably even sit here and say they're the best conference. But playing a team from the SEC is not as daunting as it used to be. They are far more beatable. And yes, to your point, Bud, NIL and the portal have a huge role in all of that. I do not believe it's a coincidence that as NIL and the portal have taken off, Nick Saban retired. Now, a huge part of that, I believe, is the frustration. Somebody told me one time that they were looking at either a high school or a transfer portal prospect at Alabama, and the kid went into Nick Saban's office and started making some demands, and Saban said, "Buddy, there's the door over there." I think the older coaches got tired of that. Not Dana Altman, who I'll touch on in a moment, but I definitely see the landscape in college football shifting towards, hey, it's more gettable now for teams outside the SEC than it used to be. And I think that's more about the SEC not being able to build as dominant of a team as they used to be able to than it is everyone else has risen up to that level. SEC teams are still really good. There are a bunch of great players. They'll have the most draft picks and they recruit really well. They still do all of that. However, the benefit of the doubt that should be given to that conference is no different than what should be given to the Big Ten. I think those two leagues are clearly above the ACC and the Big 12. But we're now going to be in 2 straight years with a Big Ten national champion. It's a small sample size, sure. But the evidence on the field, I haven't seen anything except the SEC playing more average football. Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, for goodness sake. The talent is just spreading out. And I saw this going around one time on Twitter, and I thought it was funny, but then it is funny. But then I thought about it more, and it does kind of make sense that once everyone was allowed to pay players, the SEC wasn't as dominant. And by the way, I do not fault the SEC for paying players before it was quote unquote legal at all. It was always a ridiculous notion. You know, I remember this story about several years ago at this point, that Zion Williamson got money to go to Duke. Oh my gosh, can you believe? Zion Williamson got money. I'm like, of course he did. Are you kidding me? Stop pretending. Stop pretending like it's this clean, perfect world that you have in your head. No, it's not. It's not. So the SEC is still going to put out national title contenders every single year. But the best team in the SEC for the last couple of seasons has not felt like the best team in the SEC did in prior years. So we'll continue to evolve that particular opinion here on the show if data points change. But we've got 2 seasons of this now. Once can be a coincidence, twice might be a trend a little bit. So continuing to monitor here. As I continue to monitor Oregon basketball, they just win. That's the best thing you can say about Dana Altman's team right now. They have notched 7 quad 1 victories after a couple of, you guessed it, late comebacks against Ohio State and Penn State on the road. They're tied with Auburn, who everybody views as a national title contender because they're really good. Oregon and Auburn are tied at the top of college basketball for the most quad 1 wins in the country. This is the best start at 15-2 Dana Altman has had since the 2016-17 season. And I know the thought of any sort of postseason play makes Oregon fans shudder right now. I get it. But the depth on this team cannot be overstated. It looks different every game. Sometimes they win with defense. Sometimes they win with 3-point shooting. Sometimes they win with offense. It does always come down to Jackson Shelstad being awesome. He had a go-ahead bucket with 47 seconds to go. Bam Tracy hit some big free throws, and Oregon beat Penn State by 1 point on the road. It was a hectic finish. There was a discussion on the broadcast, by the way, about whether Bam Tracy was allowed to run the baseline, and Connor Onion and his partner said very declaratively that he should have been called for a travel and that he wasn't allowed to run. That is not my understanding, and I asked a couple of different people that work in college athletics and know that sort of thing about that, and I don't believe that they were correct. So if you were watching and heard that, I have not been able to talk to a referee. Next time I call an SEU game, I'm going to just to see what he says. I don't know that was right, but regardless, Oregon just keeps finding ways to win, and that's a great thing to say about a college basketball team. In football, you feel like it's going to catch up to you eventually. In basketball, you just got to win. You want the easiest path through March Madness? You go get one of the top seeds. And guess what? It doesn't matter how these games look. You just have to win them. So Oregon beat Ohio State and Penn State on the road. They trailed in the second half again. Shelstad hit big shots again. Nate Biddle is really good. Shelstad is finding his 3-point shot. I knew that streak was going to come about eventually. And lo and behold, when Shelstad's hitting threes, this offense is awesome. Depth, talent, versatility, it's all there. I love this squad. Everydayers know I have hyped them up since they added TJ Bomb, but really even before that, but after as well. I love where this team is at right now. And they play Purdue at home on Saturday. If you're in Eugene, get to that game. That's a huge, huge matchup. Appreciate everyone listening. See you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.